Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of
The Skooled Zone.
So, I'm slowly getting the hang of the length of the episodes. It's gone down from 40 to 35 to 30. We're going to try and shoot for around 25. That's around my target length for these videos. I've learned the hard way how long it takes to edit an episode. I used to hear other YouTubers lament about how long editing takes, and I'd be like, yo, it's just gameplay footage. How hard can it be? And now that I'm in the trenches with them, I fully understand. I mean, first you got to make sure everything syncs up. Then you got to adjust the audio levels, remove some background noise, and then you have to add graphics and intros and outros and annotations and links and thumbnails, and it goes on and on. So being a YouTuber is a lot of work. Fortunately, I'm loving every minute of it so far, but it's no cakewalk. And I don't want to miss out on opportunities to connect with viewers on social media. So if I'm all tied up in post-production, then I won't be able to time manage and still maintain my day job. Because you don't make money on YouTube for a long, long time. So I just wanted to be honest with you about the video length. I'm not going to be one of those gaming channels that rushes through the game so I can jump to the next trend. I want to make this as much of an educational experience as it is a gaming experience. So with that, let's pick up where we left off, in the void. All right, so we had just gained our blink power, and we were going to head over and start making our way to the rune. So this is, I'm presuming this is sort of a memory of the Empress. You cannot save her, you can... Okay. Yes, we are reminded of that. Piero's spiritual remedy. So that's the thing that will give us more mana to use these powers. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see the mana regenerate. The only time it goes down and you have to use more elixirs is when you don't allow it to regenerate. Like if you have to use your powers in fast succession, which I think is a really cool mechanic, actually. And if you can't reach, you just have to get a little closer. There we go. Alright, so these peeps are frozen in time. So this is Emily. She's got a little note here. Emily's letter. Let's check this out first. So, I don't know if this is her drawing or what, but that's not where whale oil is located. We'll talk about river crusts later, because I have a feeling they might be based on something. I'm going to do a little research on that before we get to it. But I can tell you about black crabs. Black crab is another name for a mud crab. It's found along the riverbanks in like Africa and Asia. In fact, black crabs served soft shell are actually a popular item in Australia. So let's read her letter. Corvo, I am very sad. They say that you're dead like mother. But I'm going to put this note in a bottle and throw it in the river because I do not believe them. Living here is very strange. I do not like it. So please come for me if you can. So she's going to put this message in a bottle. And it's kind of interesting. Communication by messages in the bottle have dated back to ancient Greece and were sometimes used to map ocean currents. Bottles sealed with cork can actually remain waterproof for a very long time, enough to possibly cross continents unless they're damaged by sharks or storms. So it's a neat little moment they placed in there. So I don't know if that's Lord Pendleton or what, but definitely a very trippy little dreamscape here. We're going to keep going. Grab these little elixirs. Check this out. This looks kind of interesting. So, I don't know if this guy right here is the Lord Regent or if he's the Spy Master Burroughs. He was in that painting we saw earlier, and I called him the Lord Regent, but he might be the Spy Master. I'm not quite sure, actually. The bald guys kind of look the same to me. So anyway, I'm standing on this table here that looks like a little miniature war game. What can I tell you about that? Miniature war games have probably been around for centuries, as it allowed generals to move figures on a map that represented like battle strategies, but I don't believe it became a hobby until the early 20th century when H.G. Wells, the author of The War of the Worlds and other great sci-fi works, published a book called Little Wars, which set some rules for playing with little toy soldiers. And then, it just all took off from there, and some 60 years later, we were given games like Dungeons and Dragons, which I'll admit I've played. I'm not going to lie. I'm a gaming geek of all kinds. So, all right, we're going to see something like this a little later in the game, so I'll wait to school that fact. Oid. Oh, these guys are doomed. So this is an incendiary bolt, and it's being shot by these weird stilt walker dudes. They're called tall boys in the game. And we are going to keep moving on. Looks like a street lamp. Street lamps were actually used as far back as ancient Rome, but obviously they used candles or torches in them. Around the 18th century, gas lighting started to come into play, but it wasn't until around the 18th century when arc lamps were introduced, which again fits into the timeline nicely. They were called electric candles, I believe. I could be wrong, but I think Los Angeles was the first city to use arc lights, which is where I live. Arc lamps were eventually taken over by incandescent bulbs because they were cheaper and less complicated. But back in the 1870s, that would have been the latest and greatest technology. Look at us, we're just traipsing around this weird void here. See if we can blow these out. Oh, cool, we can blow them out. So, what were early candles actually made of? Well, early candles were made of beeswax or tallow. Tallow is actually animal fat that's been basically dried into a solid. They'd make the tallow, place a wick in it, and then further harden it into the shape of a candle. The melted wax will draw up the wick, so it coats the wick with the wax. So the wax is burned first before the wick. So let's keep moving.
In the days that follow, your trials will be great, Corvo. Seek the ancient runes bearing my mark in the lonely places of your world, and at shrines raised in my name. These runes will grant you powers beyond those of other men. To help you find these runes, I give you this, the heart of a living thing, molded by my hands. With this heart, you will hear many secrets, and it will guide you toward my runes, no matter how they may be hidden. Listen to the heart now, and find another rune.
So that was the Outsider. I think we've seen it before. Not sure. The episodes are kind of blending together for me, but it's interesting how they chose to make the Outsider look like a dude from an emo band or something instead of like an old, wise, wicked-looking guy. It's kind of an interesting character choice. So this heart here will allow us to find runes in the environment, and it'll also, as it says, whisper secrets. We might try that on a few occasions because it often has some interesting things to say. So let's keep moving because now it's indicating there is a rune up ahead. But we're going to switch to our blink because that's what we'll need for now. We can start sprinting around now. Let's hop down here. Ouch. Oh, look at that. That's cool. You know what that kind of reminds me of? I don't know if any of you ever been to the Winchester Mystery House, but it's this really interesting place in San Jose, California, where they'll do things like put chairs and tables on the ceiling and have stairs that go up to just blank walls. Very, very creepy. There's a whole backstory behind that place, but I won't go into it now. Just look it up and check it out if you're in the area. It's neat. Been there a couple times. Okay, let's keep going. We're getting close to the rune. Yep, there it is. These little purple lamps will indicate when you're near a shrine. So let's go ahead and pick it up. Actually, before we pick it up, let's take a look at the face of it. See if there's anything interesting. It's sort of like a compass. I don't really have much to say about that, so let's grab it. Okay, so we get our first power now. Well, our second power. The blink is given to you for free. So you grab this rune, and you know what we're going to do? We are going to pick Dark Vision, because when we get up to level 2, as you can see on the right, we'll get to see loot and security systems in the environment, which is just incredibly useful. And I think we can also see their fields of vision. No, that's in level 1, but just the being able to grab the loot and see security systems is just awesome. So we're going to go ahead and grab that power and keep going. Now we're going to have dark vision on a lot in this particular game, and it turns the screen sort of black and white with sort of an amber tone to it, which is unfortunate because we lose the color, but we need to use it very often. You'll see it come up. Hopefully you guys won't get too annoyed with me having that up too often.
How you use what I have given you falls upon you, as it has to the others before you. And now I return you to your world, but know that I will be watching with great interest.
All right, so we are going to awake now in our room. And I guess I can go ahead and mention that I have the Dishonored Game of the Year edition, which gives you a few bonus items. And one of the bonus items that it gives you, one of the bonus mods it gives you, is this thing called the Voidwalker's Arsenal. So when we wake up here, there's going to be a lot of loot already in the room for us. A lot of these things called bone charms. Okay, so let's head over and start grabbing these things. We'll look at them and equip them probably in the next episode, but let me... Okay. Okay, so we're going to grab this whale artifact because it's money. And here's a book. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to grab the rest of the loot and then come back and read some of these books. So let's go ahead and do that and see if there's anything else I can tell you about stuff here. So this here is a mystical wolfhound artifact. So the wolfhound here is probably referring to the Irish wolfhound, which is a breed of dog from Ireland that dates back thousands of years BC. They were specially bred for hunting and seeking, which is why you'll see them used a lot as guard dogs in Dishonored. Although the ones in Dishonored are going to look a lot meaner and mangier. There's a coin we can grab. A couple more bone charms. Another coin. A rat artifact. We talked about rats a little bit in the previous episode. And Nothing special about a fish. Okay, so all we have left is the book. So let's go check out... Oh, and then I didn't grab that, actually. Okay, so let's go read about Granny Rags here. Okay, so this is a long one. And I am probably going to put a jump link to skip this book and the second book. And if the second book is as long as this one is, then we will probably just be able to cover 2 of these books and then get to the 3rd and 4th one there in the next episode. So if you don't want to stick around and listen to me read it and hear some of the interesting factoids in the text here, then go ahead and hit that jump link. But hopefully you'll stick around and learn something, you know? I mean, not only have the developers put a lot of effort into this, I mean, look at this. Somebody had to sit down and write all this stuff out just to give you some backstory. And there's a lot of little interesting tidbits in here, vocabulary words, which could be SAT words, you never know. And will also give us some clues to things that will come up later in the game. So if you're still here and haven't jumped, then let's get started. Excerpt from the Ramblings of a Street Denizen. Of course, I'll tell you, dearie. I won't keep any secrets from you in the end. All the dreary days of my life are like the windows of a house. From the kitchen, I can see out into the garden where the leaves and stalks are brown and bug-eaten. You can see a little lump of dirt where something was wrapped in a blanket and laid to rest along the rows of twisting vines. The front room looks out onto the street where the neighbors are all setting fire to their homes, barricading themselves inside, warm and snug, dearie. Don't forget about the bedroom either. It sees into a dreary alley where hooligans are playing a game with an old man. The first 2 are hitting him with sticks, and the girl with them is kicking at his dry old ribs. Oh, to have those bones, to boil them in a pot. No one lives in my house anymore, dearie, no one you'd want to meet. When I lived there with my husband, we were fine, fine people. Vera Moray, everyone would say. As I mentioned, that was her in a previous episode. Your house is as grand as Boyle Manor, which is a location we're going to get to later in the game. Better even. Your dinners are lavish and your parties are the best. When that young Sokolov came to paint my portrait, I was nearly still in my prime. Radiant, he said. He was just barely a man, so young, painting all the best people across the land. Everyone wanted a portrait by his hand, all my friends. I was the only one, dearie, wet with his paint glistening on the canvas for a pretty coin. But it wasn't all parties and paintings. My husband and I weren't always at home, no. We traveled together, he and I, to the far ends of the Isles, beyond even all the way to the Red Cliffs and Pandyssia. So I think Pandyssia is a far-off continent in the world of Dishonored, like Bristol, except it's supposedly uninhabited. Maybe in a future sequel to Dishonored that, it might take place there. Kind of like how Bethsoft does with the Elder Scrolls games. Each game focuses on a new region on a big map. So to dig in the rocks and crawl through the caves, holding up candles and squinting at the walls. Many precious things we came upon, but none so precious as the boy with the black eyes, dearie. All those marks and bones carved so deep and polished bright. I brought the old bones home, hid them from my dear husband. Then I learned to boil them and carve them myself. They made such good presents, dearie. The little mute boy took them home. He loved them so. All the time he came back with new ones for me, holding them up so I could see it in his eyes, even though his tongue was still. Granny, his eyes would say to me, carve these bones for me. Make me another present. And he went so far, all the way to Dunwall Tower. The royal headsman himself now. So a headsman is another name for a type of executioner that chops people's heads off. A little mute boy and his shiny, shiny sword. Better bones were what I needed, you see. Better bones to carve and polish, scrape and gleam. My dear old husband always tired. I made him soup and then he was sick. Better bones was all for my little mute boy. Carved in the name of the one with the black eyes. And after my husband was gone, given away as birthday gifts. I didn't want to live there anymore. So now I'm old and don't have many to give presents to. It's sifting through the garbage for Granny Rags, feeding the little birdies that gather at my feet. No one wants to have tea, dearie, especially those rude louts. So a lout is like a clumsy oaf for a crude person. On Bottle Street, Slackjaw and his boys always meddling with an old woman, trying to make her way. In the end, together with him, you and me in the dreary night with stars above and below, and always the one with the black eyes, dearie. So, the black eyes, he's probably talking about the outsider, I'm not sure. But this whole thing is sort of some foreshadowing to when we meet Granny Rags later. She's sort of describing her house and telling her that if you interact with her and do things for her, like little side quests, then she'll give you runes. So instead of coming right out and saying, hey, here's a cool way to earn bonus powers, they're sort of putting it in book form. So there you go. You see, you learn something new every day. All right, so let's head on over to this one and see what this one has to say. Early life and criminal record, Slackjaw. Okay, here we go. Excerpt from a series of letters sent by a member of the Bottle Street gang. You want the chinwag on Slackjaw? So, chinwag means to gossip. A chinwag is like the inside scoop. What was he like when he was young, before he got his name? Oh, he's got a cool head now, but it weren't always like that in the days before he was a boss of the Bottle Street gang. Time was, young Slackjaw wasn't such a reasonable man. Okay, so this guy's definitely talking in sort of an accent. It'll be a little tricky to read, but we'll keep going. Like most of us, he grew up on the streets, running with a pack of ragamuffins. A ragamuffin is like a street urchin or a ragged waif, avoiding the low pitchin' whenever he needed. Dark-haired and dark-eyed, smoking on a pipe by the age of 10. Wow. For them born into the brothels or coming from the orphanages, it was either the gangs or working with the mudlarks, and no one wants that. Some got pressed into the Navy or put down in the mines run by the Pendleton or Boyle families, which is a clue that'll come up later, actually. As hard as it was on the street, as hungry as we all got, at least he was free. By the time we weren't little uns anymore, Slackjaw was one to watch, usually calling the shots when we took down a farmer's cart or a sidewalk street vendor. He'd come up with a plan, give everyone some part to play, and decide on the split. Most of us just went along because we learned fast that we made out better like that. More food, more coin. Plus, none of us wanted to deal with Slackjaw when he was in a rage. He worked on a couple of big jobs with Black Sally, who I think is a female gang leader. We don't see in the game, but we'll hear about her now and then. I think she was killed in the events prior to Dishonored. So he worked on a couple of big jobs with Black Sally across town. That was enough to get the attention of the other bosses. He wasn't just a street kid anymore. Now he was an up-and-comer, which meant trouble. Another guy who fancied himself as such was Mike the Fish. He sounds like a mobster, who was working his way up running the protection racket among the factory women. One fine evening we were all talking in a bawdy show in the theater house. I'm going to put a little pop-up what bawdy show is, because I think it's something that doesn't come to mind, but I've heard that term before. Mike the Fish and his lot are there in the cheap seats too, just down the aisle from us. Mike gets a wild idea. He wasn't big on planning and throws a heavy ceramic spittoon at Slackjaw. So a spittoon is like a bowl for spitting in. It's also known as a cuspidor. It was used a lot in the days when chewing tobacco was popular. You'll see them a lot in spaghetti westerns. So he hits him square in the face and breaks his jaw. Maybe that's why it's called Slackjaw. We look to see if there's going to be a blood brawl, but Slackjaw just points at the door and we all leave, with Mike laughing at our backs. Waking up the next day without telling us why, Slackjaw motions for us all to follow. He still can't say a word, so we just came along. We stop at the docks and Slackjaw buys, actually pays coin for it, a heavy chain covered in hooks. It's for fishing in the deep, something you'd attach to a long line off the side of a ship. It's about 4 feet, made of thick links, and there are shark's hooks coming off it at different angles. Slackjaw's got that thing wrapped around his left arm, dangling at his side. Not sure how he knew where Mike the Fish was staying, but when we reach his girl's house, Slackjaw throws a bottle through the window just like that. It's almost noon. There's a bunch of screaming inside, and Mike pokes his head out, looking wide-eyed and baffled. When he sees Slackjaw out in the street, a look comes over his face that still gives me the willies. Pure murder. Mike comes out of the side door, bellowing like a bloodox. I'm going to look that one up too, a bloodox. I wonder if that's a real thing. Holding a cleaver, heading straight for Slackjaw. When they come together in the street, Slackjaw spins and the shark hooks bite deep into Mike's arm and shoulder. He screams, but Slackjaw holds onto the chain. He's standing there with his jaw broken, clenched tight, and with the chain wrapped around his left arm, hooks sunk into Mike the fish, just knifing him as fast as he can. Mike couldn't fight very well, hooked like that using his left hand, but he was a big guy and it took a lot of stabbing before he went to his knees. Everyone was cheering at first, but then we all went quiet. It just kept going and going until finally it was just Mike the fish blubbering, crying like a baby at the sound of Slackjaw's knife. When it was over, and here's the brilliant part, Slackjaw took out a note and stuck it to Mike's face with a nail. It just said, "If you want a job, come to Bottle Street." Yeah, that's OG right there. Slackjaw didn't talk right for a couple of months, but word spread fast. By the end of the year, once we had a sizable gang going, he sent out letters to the other bosses telling them that he was running a brand new crew over on Bottle Street. Most of them laughed and beat up the guys who delivered the letters. Green-eyed Trish even came back missing a thumb, but apparently Slackjaw was expecting that kind of reaction and had a backup plan. I mean, at least Slackjaw's literate and can write, so that's pretty good for an old 19th century mobster. So a week later, 4 of the bosses were dead. Seemed like a series of unfortunate events, but everyone knew better. One shot dead by the watch while standing in the middle of a meat market. Another slipping and falling into the water, out cold. One of the older bosses found in bed with his belly opened wide and a Tibian pear stuffed in his mouth. Still not sure what that meant, and Sheila Barnsworth was found bubbling in a cauldron of hot wax. So they're getting creative with their murders, huh? Slackjaw sent out another set of letters, offers to underbosses telling them that they'd be treated fair as peers. He even sent Green-Eyed Trish one of the letters. All of the underbosses accepted. After spilling the guts of his main competition, Slackjaw went in for stabilizing his business, real neat-like, calling in favors, smoothing things over, giving everyone a little bit of coin or drink as a bonus, showing what he could be like as a boss. So everyone got quiet, which always makes the boys of the City Watch nervous, of course. Word went out among the Royal Spymaster's snitches, the responsible citizens group they call themselves, telling everyone working in a shop, sweeping off the front steps of their homes to keep watchful eyes for Slackjaw and his men, trying to suss out, which means like to investigate or discover. It probably came from the word suspect. So they were trying to suss out what they were up to and what had just happened, but Slackjaw ain't stupid. He greased a few palms among the shopkeepers and watched too, which by the way means bribe. Most people are going to know some of this stuff, but I'm just telling, in case there's, like some 10-year-olds watching, don't know what grease and palms means. All right, telling him that he was in town to stay and things would be run properly from now on, without so much blood. He was finally a real boss, ready to settle into the business of moving whiskey, running the hound fights, and offering up the ladies and gentlemen of the night, if you take my meaning. This all sounds a little bit like that show Boardwalk Empire. That was a really good show. If you've never seen it before, you got to check it out. If you have seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Then the plague came. At first, it seemed like a good thing. A few people got sick, and everyone wanted to buy those potions from Sokolov or Piero. Health elixir, a spiritual remedy, they'd call them. Slackjaw told me he saw an opportunity. We already had an old whiskey factory with a still where we could water the stuff down and sell it discounted. Doing the same thing with Sokolov's elixir was a smart plan. Pretty soon, everybody in the slums was sick and business was good. But after a while, there were so many people down with the plague that everyone got scared. Everybody started acting real nasty and everything fell apart. When people can't work, they don't have the coin for elixir, watered down or pure. When the Empress died, it seemed like Dunwall would slide into the void. Spymaster Burroughs took over and the Watch started using all that new Sokolov technology. Watchtowers, tall boys, and then arc pylons. They put up a wall of light across Clavering Boulevard and cracked down hard. But Slackjaw is surprising us again. Instead of leaving town on a boat for Morley or one of those other isles, he stayed and kept it all together. We get as much elixir to fight off the plague as the City Watch, with their taxes and rations, and that's kept us alive so far. Crowley, the Bottle Street Gang. So we're going to actually meet Crowley later. He's sort of a character that comes up, sort of, you'll see. But this is interesting. I've never actually read all the way through this, and it seems like Slackjaw may have actually inadvertently contributed to the spread of the plague by trying to turn a profit off of bootleg stuff. That's pretty interesting. I don't know why we got a little save there, but we did. Maybe it causes something to happen later in the game. Dishonored does that. There's a lot of little choices you can make that will have effects like way down the road. In fact, when we get to the DLC, there's 2 of them. If you make a decision in one DLC, it actually affects something that happens in the second DLC, which I think is always really cool when developers put that kind of detail into a game. So we're going to end here, and we're going to pick up where we left off with these 2 books, which, again, you're free to skip. You know, nothing holding you back from hitting that skip button. But if you stick around and listen to it, there are some really cool little factoids embedded in each of these texts. All right, so once again, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Make sure that you like this video if you like it, and subscribe if you subscribe it. All right, thanks again, and we'll see you in the next episode.